Good evening. This is the February 21st, 2018 meeting of the Finance Committee. Being 7 o'clock, we're starting on time. Our agenda tonight, we'll first have a review and vote on some transfers. Then we're going to go through an overview of the fiscal 2019 budget. And then we're actually going to start in reviewing and voting on some of these budgets and CIP. This will include the moderator, selectmen, town manager, departments, finance committee, human resources, finance department, which includes accounting, assessing, treasury collections. We'll also look at maturing debt and interest. We have, I believe, a couple of minutes to review, and then we'll adjourn. So with a couple of department heads here, we're going to open with those and get those folks in and out of here as soon as possible. The librarian's not here just yet. All right, let's go to our second transfer. This would be under the DPW Parks. Here we go.
Mr. Chairman, would you mind if our town manager started off with a few comments?
Go
Because she
ahead.
has a
I
meeting.
apologize, that's right.
Oh, no, that's
Yes.
okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Finance Committee, we're going through another budget season already, so welcome and thank you in advance for all your hard work. And I appreciate being allowed to just speak for a couple minutes. No disrespect at all, but I have another meeting at the same time, the Historic Commission, that I need to get to, so I appreciate it. Ed Kazanovich, the CFO and Assistant Town Manager, is obviously going to present the FY19 budget, but before he does, I just wanted to make a note, and I'm sure he'll go through it in greater detail, but we did listen to all of you last year through the budget process, and we heard loud and clear, and thankfully, your support for making sure that we come into you this year with priorities in town departments that for several years we have not addressed to the level we should be addressing them for various reasons, trying to be cautious and conservative and get all of the priorities that are on the school side, the town side, capital side. So we feel that we've done a very good job this year of identifying those priorities, and we did have several meetings with the school department, and I want to commend and thank them for listening to us and letting and understanding that we have some needs that need to be met this year as well, and going back and looking at their budget and scrubbing it so that we could bring to you a budget that does meet all of our collective needs, and I believe that you have that here. So just a couple of things that I want to mention that we identified as priorities, and we have identified these as priorities the last couple of years, but you'll see that in this year's budget, is police, fire, DPW, and Department of Development Inspection and Services, not with regard to new personnel, but with regard to making sure that we have existing personnel, either in expanded positions or bringing in help from other areas. And one area that I would say, that I mean that by, we did hire an economic development coordinator as of February 1st of this year, and that was a position that was budgeted for half of this year, so that entire position will be placed under the Department of Development and Inspectional Services moving forward, as opposed to in my office. So you'll see changes like that. Police and fire, we did commit to additional personnel over a multi-year phased-in approach, so you'll see that represented as well. And clearly, we heard the needs of and the concerns of the Finance Committee with regard to the Department of Public Works, and particularly with highway and fleet maintenance. So we're looking at a combined position to give us support in both of those areas at DPW. In addition to that, I'm very proud that we came in well under Proposition 2.5 limits again, and over an 8-year period, because we haven't taxed to the max, we've been able to save the taxpayers of the community over $23.4 million because of that. So we are in good financial condition. We have free cash surplus that we're proud of, and it's there if needed. We have our new free cash policy that went into effect this year, and we were able to allocate dollars through town meeting to meet some of the needs that we had all identified last year, and we hope to be able to do that again this fall. So we're very proud of the budget, very proud of the department heads for working with us, and number one, for all their patience throughout the years, because we try to meet their needs, but they all understand and recognize it hasn't always been possible, but this year, we've made a strong effort to do that, and I think you'll see that reflected in this budget, and want to thank everyone for working with us and for identifying those needs. You're also going to see some additional needs that, as you know, things need to be flexible, and things do come up and things change really on a daily basis with state funding and various grant funding and projects that we need to get done and things that break that we didn't anticipate. So you'll see some of that as well. So I thank you very much for taking the time to go through this, and we'll look forward to working with you over the next couple of months. And if my meeting gets out and you're still going, I'll come back.
Great. Thanks for
you.
joining
And if
us.
anyone has any questions prior to me leaving, happy to answer them.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
All right, thanks.
Kept it to 3 minutes. That's great.
Well, you're all done.
Is our librarian here, Jean? Came in just as we were starting. I was going to skip over you, Jean. I'm not going to now. Bill can wait. Great, come on up. That's great. We're looking at transfers right now. You're the first transfer.
Okay.
Let me go through the transfer. There's what, 1, 2, 3 transfers here. First transfer, this is a transfer of $1,634.61 to the director. This is a 5-day vacation buyback. That's coming from the Assistant to Director Technology account. I'm going to open it up to questions, Jean, first, and then if we need any answers. Any questions on this? Kim?
I noticed that the 3 transfers on this sheet are all coming from the Assistant to the Director for Technology. Is that a vacant position?
It's vacant. I filled it temporarily with some part-time positions. I'm addressing it a little bit differently in the upcoming budget and hope to fill it permanently, in July.
Thank you.
Great. Any other questions? Do we have a motion on this?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Great. Second transfer, also from the Assistant to Director Technology. Amount requested $10,000 to programs, and the reason for this transfer is state guidelines for program reporting expenses have changed, necessitating adjustment to the Mars reporting and resource compliance. Any questions on this?
Motion to recommend?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Final transfer also from Assistant to Director Technology. Amount requested $840. This is to the Assistant to Director Admin. This was for a COLA that was not factored in.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. That's it, Gene. Good to see you. Thank you.
Don't you have one other transfer?
There was another one that changed accounts.
The one for your buyback. Let me talk to you. You could pay that a long time ago, right?
We good, or?
Yeah, I thought we had one more.
Okay. Unless I missed it.
We'll give me
Okay.
next week.
That's fine. We'll see you later in the process, Gene. Thank you. Okay, DPW Director Bill Coyle's here. Bill, we've got one transfer? At least one? Should be a couple, yeah, okay. We'll get them in order. Let's see. So you're handling the ones for the cemetery? I was looking at Mr. Fairbanks' signature there, got me a little confused. Now, are all of these transfers somewhat related, Bill?
They
Worth
are.
discussing?
Sure.
If you could give us an overview before we go through each one?
Sure, Mr. Chairman, members of the Finance Committee. The transfers, 3 of the 4 are related to salary adjustments that were made when Wayne Bloomquist, the Cemetery and Parks Superintendent, retired. Wayne had big shoes to fill, and we always referred to him as Johnny on the spot, because anything we asked Wayne to do, he was always right there to do. So as a superintendent, he would, run the departments, Parks and Cemetery, but also if somebody needed the trash emptied, he'd run over, rather than delegate it, he'd run over and just take care of it. So, again, big shoes to fill, but what we tried to do was, after Wayne left, we made several adjustments within Parks and Cemetery. The first being Kenny Fairbanks, who was the highway superintendent, previously had been the park superintendent, so very familiar with the Parks Department, and actually still played an active role in a lot of the parks maintenance over the years, even with Wayne involved in parks as well. So Kenny Fairbanks became the highway, parks, and cemetery superintendent. Certainly, there was a lot of work that Wayne did, in particular at the cemetery, that we needed to make adjustments, and one of the big adjustments that we made was to have clerical hours in place. So we now have a clerical person at the cemetery from 8 to 12, Monday through Friday. So that person was an individual that was shared services originally at the town hall, within the finance office and also in the tax collector's office. So now it's within finance and cemetery. And that was Pat Messina, who actually had many years of experience working for funeral homes. So it was actually an excellent fit. She was very familiar with the process, with interments and scheduling and whatnot. So she became the clerk within the cemetery division. And so that's one of the transfers that you see before you. That's the $18,718 was to cover her hours. We saw that as a very beneficial adjustment because in the past, there were really no office hours. So if somebody wanted to go to the cemetery and purchase a lot, make arrangements, they would either have to leave a message on the office phone or try to, find somebody working out on the grounds. So it wasn't really the best way to handle the services. So we found that to be a very big improvement. The other changes that we made were the two existing cemetery employees. Their level of responsibility increased dramatically when Wayne left. Although when Wayne would go on vacation or would not be available, would cover a lot of his responsibilities. And they're union employees. They were light equipment operators, but they were actually taking on much more responsibility than they were ever compensated for. And I did realize that even more so when Wayne did leave, and I found that the two individuals who worked in the cemetery department were very familiar with the process. They have to lay out where the graves are, and obviously very important process, and they would meet with individuals and show them where the locations were as well, and actually perform the excavation for the interments. So both of those employees were promoted. One was promoted to a general foreman, and one was promoted to a foreman position. We wanted to make sure we had 100% buy-in with those two employees, and we do, and it's worked out great ever since Wayne's retirement. And then the last change was within the Parks Department. Again, because Wayne was the Parks Superintendent, we created a general foreman position within the Parks Department. Okay, and that's Pete Bullock was promoted to general foreman in the Parks Department, and the other two individuals were Ray Robichaud in the cemetery was promoted to general foreman, and Jason Scrappa was promoted to a general foreman. The other one was foreman. So these were changes that we found that they were all going to have additional responsibilities. And then after that, there's still a function of actual labor component that Wayne still served. So with the remaining funds available after these changes, we also are, it's in this year's budget, budgeting for a seasonal employee to assist at the cemetery as well, especially come Memorial Day services or anything through May, and then just maintaining the grounds. So those are the changes that we made with Wayne retiring. I think that since then they've worked out very well. Again, Wayne's shoes are big shoes to fill, but I think that the team has done a great job in filling that gap, and we've actually made some improvements in the level of services, I think, just for availability with office hours as well.
So these requested transfers will be covering salaries, wages, et cetera, through the balance of this year.
Yes. Yeah, correct.
All right, any other questions before we begin on this?
Just a brief
Yeah.
question on, so when the charter change was made to bring DPW as opposed to the separate departments, and so these employees being brought up, they still, they have the potential for other functions? Are you being utilized for other functions? Am I?
Absolutely, absolutely. In fact, the general foreman in the Parks Department, he's actually Parks and Cemetery. So where we only have 2 full-time employees at the cemetery, the Parks general foreman has been trained on going up to the cemetery and locating the graves and performing the excavations. So he's been cross-trained into the cemetery department. We've sent cemetery employees out if there's limited work in the winter to go fill potholes. There's cross, I don't want to say training, work utilized on all divisions constantly. We'll have the highway employees working on sewer easements, highway department employees at the golf course, they were doing drainage in the fall. So wherever they're needed, we utilize the employees.
Okay. I know that was the idea or the spirit behind not having all these individual departments that.
Yeah, it's certainly been a huge benefit. It's absolutely, to me, the way you have to run a town or a DPW. To have individual divisions saying, this is my job and this is yours, well, sometimes during the course of the year, different priorities change, and so you need to be able to move your people to adjust for that.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, let's go through the transfers. Thank you, Ken. The first transfer, this is under DPW Parks. This is a transfer of, looks like $5,900 to wages from superintendent salary. This transfer is to cover the general foreman position.
Recommend approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. And under cemetery, the first transfer, $4,700 to the wages account. This is from the superintendent's salary account, as discussed. Transfers to cover the general foreman and working foreman, I believe that's position.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. The next transfer amount requested, $18,718. This is to the clerical line from the superintendent's salary line. This is a transfer to cover clerical position.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. The final transfer, this is $900. This is to the supplies and equipment line from the superintendent's salary line to cover transfer to cover veteran flag holders.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is that all we got tonight, Paul?
I think that's it.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Thanks for your time. We'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Our next transfer, this is under building, I guess. Darlene's here, or EDIS. Ed, how are you tonight?
Good, how are you? Good evening.
It looks like you get your hammer and nails out on this.
We do. Hopefully you saw a little bit of the, some of the finished product.
Yeah.
We are
Can
literally...
you give us a quick on what happened over here? I mean, it looks great.
Sure. So we, as Julie opened with, as part of her introduction, our office is expanding with staff, and we are maxed out for space. So every available inch in the department is filled with either a desk or copy machine or just anything that we need to do our jobs. So having that in mind and knowing that we needed more office space and workspace for the employees to be more functional, we kind of took a look at what we had, because we know we've got a certain amount of space, and kind of a collaboration. We thought we could use some of the hallway in a better, more positive manner. We had some old filing cabinets there, and really didn't do us any any service. So we decided to kind of take a look at it. Some plans were kind of drawn up. We kind of went back and forth, and we decided that we probably could make some customer service space out here for our clerks. So it worked out beautifully. The project has been going on for approximately about a month and a half, and the DPW Facilities Division is just outstanding. So they've done all the beautiful work that you see, and the project continues. So we have probably about another month to 6 weeks that they'll be continuing in the department and going through and making office space. So we're pretty excited about it, and we're looking forward to our new staff that's coming in.
Great. The amount requested is at an estimate to cover a full cost to either one of you, materials, all that kind of stuff for this?
With a provided buffer,
Sure.
in the event there are some unforeseen costs that they may run into.
I saw the round number that usually tells me where there's a bit of a budget to that, so that's great. So what we're doing here is we're requesting a $10,000 transfer from a salary assistant account to miscellaneous supplies building, and this would be for the renovation project. The availability of funds within that salary assistant account, Darlene, can you comment on that?
Sure, absolutely. Some unfortunate news, we did lose our local inspector within the past 2 weeks. The inspector's position was filled as of last July, full-time for the first time. And the person that we had in it did a great job. Unfortunately, another town stole him away. We have that position is vacant right now, and we are advertising for it. We're hoping to get a local inspector in as soon as possible, because we definitely need them. But with that opportunity, we have the availability for some funds to be able to use towards the renovation if the board so chooses.
Sure. Yeah. Eddie, any consideration in capitalizing this cost at all, or was that just, didn't really qualify?
No, because it's being done, the total cost, the major cost of what's being done actually is the carpet, which ran about $7,000 and change, I believe. The other materials really wouldn't qualify into the CIP plan because it has a value of under 10 collectively, so.
Okay.
We were able to utilize some other building improvement funds that have been voted on an annual basis as part of that $100,000 overlay surplus pool. We did have a contingency amount in there that we actually tapped into to get the project going. Given the situation that Darlene kicked off as part of her explanation, Shannon actually is now the Economic Development Director. She's currently being housed in Julie's office because there's no space for her over here right now. So that was done in consideration of that and for some other new positions that we've recently filled.
Okay. I'll open up any other questions. All right, so we have, the amount requested is $10,000. This is, once again, going to miscellaneous supplies. Do we have a motion on this?
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thanks,
Thank you
Darlene.
very much.
So, under Board of Health, we have a transfer request for $66 to dues and meetings. This is to renew a license for those that care from education, so. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Ian, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Great, thanks, Darlene. So, we have some
One
more.
more.
One more. Let's see, this is both going to the travel account under DDIS Animal Control. I'll accept a motion to take these together.
So moved?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. First is from the vaccines account, $900 to travel, and the second is from the telephone services account, also going to travel. Darlene, just a brief reason for the
Sure.
request?
So this was an unexpected cost. We had last year a vacancy in the animal control backup. We were fortunate to be able to come up with a solution to have actually two individuals that provide backup to the animal control officer, because obviously it's a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week position. So with that, these positions were filled, and travel was not something that we were planning on. So we budgeted for travel for our full-time animal control officer, but when the backup came in, that's not something that we had seen ahead of time. So that is the requested amount to cover the cost for the backup.
Okay.
Motion to approve?
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome. The last is just while you're here anyways, I'd given a verbal approval back, I'll say last year, it was actually in December. This was for the inspector vehicle. The cost, I think, on that vehicle came in $3,000 higher than originally inspected. And as we had discussed, I think we had a conference call on this, a lot of it had to do with, we got all-wheel drive, I believe, for this vehicle. To me, that was the biggest thing on that, which, as anyone remembers how December was rolling, all you had to do was look out the window and say, yeah, with the hills in Auburn, why don't we have all-wheel drive on some of these inspector cars? And I believe that original price was from a few years ago anyway, so.
Right, so you're spot on. So the, as you know, we do have the, I call it the little go-kart. We have a inspectional services vehicle, a small economy car that is fabulous. It's great on gas, it serves us well, but the thing that it doesn't serve us well on, in which we've kind of found out just through the years, is when it snows and when we have, when we do inspections on sites that are really not developed yet. Sometimes we get stuck. I've been stuck myself, embarrassed to say, but the car is great when it's not adverse weather. So when we did the CIP line item for the vehicle, we didn't plan on all-wheel drive, and it's something that we were able to cover it from our accounts for that transfer, but I do appreciate, you know, anything that you can do for that. It's a vehicle that's much needed.
Right, so this was a transfer from the inspector account, was $3,000, $30.50 to the vehicle account just to cover this. And I think I had shared this probably through a email or something with everyone, so.
Motion to approve.
Thank you very much.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thanks, Darlene.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
We'll see you in a few weeks, too.
Sounds
right?
great. Good night.
All right. We have Fire Chief Coleman here for our next transfer. Chief, this is the one that just came in yesterday, today?
It is, Mr. Chairman. If you don't mind, I'm going to stand here. I'm not feeling hot, and I don't want
Yeah,
to.
well, I was hoping Ed would stay over there, too. He doesn't sound that good.
I don't want to
Let me just
expose
go
the
through
rest
the
of it.
motion first on this. It's a $10,000 request to medical supplies from fire suppression to cover medical supply expense. I'll open that up to you, Chief.
Correct. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We had some additional expenses in the EMS line this year that really sort of revolved around the implementation of our ballistic protection that we've placed on the ambulances. We had to buy tourniquets, quick clot, a lot of things to set not only that up, but we set up some individual kits within the ambulances that basically revolved around trauma. And then in this year's ambulance inspection in January. Sometimes a lot of the equipment, a lot of the disposable equipment has expiration, so in preparation of our ambulance inspection this year, there was quite a bit of the disposable equipment, so that threw a few, about $1,000 or something. So we had about $3,000 that was, I don't want to say unanticipated, but $3,000 this year that wouldn't have been normal in normal years.
That's it, huh?
That's it.
I like it when you have a cold, nice, succinct. That's great. My guess is the $10,000 is covering.
I am hoping, in consultation with Deputy Johnson, we looked at the numbers yesterday, trying to project it out. We're hoping that that's going to cover us until June 30th.
Because I know you normally have some kind of transfer.
We do. Normally, it's not that high around this time, but that additional equipment that we purchased is what threw us over the top. But we are hoping that that's going to carry us to June 30th.
Now, I've been under the impression that by and large, the ambulance receipts kind of cover some of this.
The ambulance receipts covers the entire EMS medical supply budget.
That's why, I just wasn't sure if it was all of it, so. Any questions on this transfer?
Motion to approve?
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thanks,
Thank you.
Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Feel
Thank you.
better. I thought you said everyone down the fire station was healthy. Come on, Chief. I believe the CFO was there, too. Eddie, you're a carrier. All right, our next transfer.
Patient zero.
Yeah, patient zero, the CFO. I love it. All right, our next transfer is under Town Manager, amount requested $1,500. This is going to the town audit account. This covered a cost required annual independent audit, and this is coming from professional services. Any
Motion
questions?
to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Thank you.
Not going to get me on that one.
Our next transfer, this is a reserve account transfer. This is to the manager salary. Amount requested $1,376 to meet contractual obligation for increase resulting from performance evaluation. I've got a question on this. Ed, is this coming from a salary reserve account or the reserve account?
Salary reserve.
Okay.
The next two have to do with performance evaluations that were performed after the budget was submitted.
And they're both going to salary reserve?
Right.
Oh, from salary reserve, okay.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Our next salary reserve transfer, amount requested $2,529. This is to meet contractual obligation for the town accountant resulting from performance evaluation.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Ed, will these adjustments, were they reflected in the budget coming up?
They're reflected in the FY19 budget, but there still is an evaluation component that will take place. It takes
Again, next
place in the spring of every year.
Yep, okay. Our next transfer, is this also a salary reserve, the clerical?
This is a salary reserve.
Okay, amount requested, this is also under accountant, $1,742. This is to meet payroll obligation resulting in reclassified for shared clerical and accountant cemetery departments.
Motion to approve.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Our next transfer, I'm assuming also salary reserve. This would be under assessor, assistant assessor data collector, amount requested $2,899, payroll line item, short due to new hire after budget was submitted for fiscal 18.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Okay, this is under treasurer collector. This is not a reserve account transfer. Amount requested, $640 to the clerical account from the other clerical account under treasurer collector. This is to redistribute budget allocation for shared clerical position.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed, so voted. Under treasurer collector, excuse me, amount requested $1,000, this is to the certification account to fund treasurer collector's certification stipend, and this is coming from the clerical account.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Just a couple more here. Under emergency management, amount requested $250 to the training account from travel and meetings. This is to transfer money for CPR training for the Citizens Emergency Response Team, or the CERT team.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. And our last transfer, this is a reserve transfer, not a salary reserve transfer. Relief and medical, amount requested, $12,000. This is to cover current claims liability for the next 20 weeks, approximately $1,400 bi-weekly. Claims are running at $2,800 bi-weekly from Larry Corbin.
Motion to approve?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Haven't seen that in a while.
No, the veterans' claims and relief appropriation, you never know what to expect. I mean, claims running as they are now, they were double that not too long ago. So it's really a roller coaster ride, and we try to manage it as best we can, but these are qualifying expenses due to our veterans under the provisions of the law. I think we've been fortunate in prior years. So we did up it somewhat for FY19 to account for that elevated claims history, so.
Okay? No, that's fine. All right, our next agenda item, this will be an overview of the fiscal 19 budget. Eddie gave a presentation to the Board of Selectmen a week and a half ago, and I asked him to also kind of use the overhead here, just, we're kind of used to looking up at that too. I didn't realize that he's fighting a cold, so if he goes over to the podium over there, it's probably to our benefit anyway, so I'll leave that open to you.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I probably have about a 10-minute presentation. A lot of what you'll see in the presentation is really an excerpt of the transmittal letter that's part of your budget packet. And that's what we kind of highlighted when we presented it to the board, who unanimously voted it to transmit it to the Board of to the Finance Committee at their last meeting. So with that, I have about a 10-minute
Great,
brief
thanks, Ed.
presentation. So the FY19 budget recommendation that is presented to you tonight is a balanced budget. It actually leaves about $410,000 of unobligated tax levy out of Prop 2.5. Given that, we're expecting an excess levy capacity if that does not in any way become part of the recommended budget of close to $5 million. At present recommendation, it utilizes about 62% of Prop 2.5, which means we'd be taxing at a level of 1.55% out of the allowable 2.5%. On the revenue side, once again, it utilizes 1.55 out of 2.5. It would just shy of $5 million on the excess levy. Right now, I estimate a new growth we believe to be somewhat conservative at $475,000, given that the 5-year average has been $701,246. So the chief assessor has indicated to me that she's received and reviewed the permits to date. She honestly believes that we'll be able to make $475,000. A lot of that new growth is residential in nature. So I don't think we're going to see the growth spurt that we've seen in the last few years, where we recognize about $800,000 in new growth. But we're confident at this point in time we'll at least meet the $475,000. That's something we won't know until roughly end of June. We'll have a better handle on that. So as you can see below, the level of taxation in order to support this budget would be $40,064,757.71 out of a levy limit of $44.6 million, therefore leaving about $4.6 million of excess levy. On the state aid revenue, we're using the governor's released budgetary numbers. Combined, that's going to give the town of Auburn an additional $987,000 and change, just shy of $1 million. We believe the governor's numbers will hold, given the economics of the state economy right now. The bulk of that is coming by way of Chapter 70 school aid, about $881,000, with a 4%, roughly a 4% growth in unrestricted local aid of just shy of $60,000. As you can see below, you can see the level of Cherry Sheet state aid in FY18 is $12.3 million. This would give us roughly $1 million more at $13.3 million. Our local receipts, for the most part, is level funded, all but for our enterprise funds. This revenue represents adjustments based upon budgets for the enterprise fund, as well as indirect cost calculations. Our available funds are down $709,000 over current fiscal year. That is primarily made up of the free cash that we appropriated for FY18 for stabilization fund, as well as additional money that was voted to OPEB. So combined, we had $350,000 of $350,000 that was appropriated stabilization. An additional $175,000 was appropriated to OPEB, and $100,000 from overlay surplus that was used as an outside article. That may be considered at the annual town meeting, but it's not in this recommendation right now. Those three totals are about $700,000, and that's where the difference lies. The debt exclusion, which we raise every year, is a result of voter approval for the Auburn High School and Auburn Middle School. We'd be raising $3.1 million. It's about $158,000 above current year levels. It represents a 5.36% increase over current fiscal year. If you look at the revenue summary of the components that I just identified, the total projected revenue recommendation for the FY19 budget is $67,245,931.42. This represents about a $2.1 million increase, or about a 3.21% increase over current fiscal year. As you can see, identified under total revenue, bottom right-hand corner, 3.21. Here's revenue represented as a pie chart. As you can see, the bulk of the revenue is raised through local taxation, 59.58%, followed by Cherry Sheet state aid, $13.3 million represents 19.81%. Local receipts at $9.1 million represents 13.60% of the total revenue. Debt exclusion at $3.1 million, 4.63%, and available funds of $1.6 represents 2.38% of the total revenue. On the expense side, town department increases represent 4.19%. Now, there is a slight revision to this that I'm going to give you after this presentation for public safety as a result of some discussions recently that we recently had yesterday. The police department adjustment is budget neutral. It didn't change the bottom line. There is a $25,000 increase in the fire side relative to the revision. That is not reflected in these numbers right here. Anyway, total town departments, total increase over current fiscal year, about $607,000 or 4.19% increase. The school department increase represents a $867,801.22, a 3.47%. I can tell you, and you're going to see in your budget packet, there's a transmittal letter from the school superintendent that the original request was 3.99. As a result of some discussions we had collectively with school administration, they pared their budget down in order to make some accommodations for the general government side that Julie alluded to when she first kicked off this meeting. Here are some of the other increases that are made up of fixed costs as well as some other assessments and other budgetary items. Bottom line increase over current fiscal year, total budget 2.58% increase. Up roughly 1.7 million. The highlights on the expense side, we are proposing a recommendation for 16.40 full-time equivalents. And it's broken down as follows. There are 3 firefighter paramedics recommended in the budget before you tonight. 2 are going to come from new general fund revenues. The 3rd position is coming from existing funds within the fire department, a reallocation of the fire suppression funds. Police department calls for 1 new patrolman's position, as well as a new communications director for dispatch. And there is 1 position recommended for the Department of Public Works, identified as a heavy equipment operator. In the school department, we have 10.40 FTEs, and as you can see, they're identified under the school department on the lower part of the screen. Other general fixed costs, I can tell you that employee benefits provides for a group health insurance index of 8%. We're currently having discussions with our insurance advisor on our FY19 renewal numbers. That probably won't be known for a couple of weeks, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. We're looking at various options to help contain that cost. But all other costs, debt and interest, insurance, fuel, utility costs, have been covered under this recommendation. And we believe that our annual appropriation also for OPEB is covered in here. It will be coming as a recommendation, as a warrant article, but we did provide the $500,000 for that request. Also, like every year, there is no recommendation for stabilization until the fall town meeting when the final numbers are known. The capital expenditures under a separate warrant article, and the detail has been provided to you. Once again, we're using 1/10 of Prop 2.5 to cover a portion of our capital needs. The FY19 budget utilizes close to $1 million of tax levy now to cover our annual cost for capital. That is perpetual. That grows every year by that 1/10. And we are using $110,000 from the stabilization account to cover a down payment towards the acquisition of an engine truck within the fire department to minimize our borrowing costs. Here is a breakdown by function on the expenditure side. Education has the largest share of the pie at $27.1 million, represents 40.64% of total direct appropriation. Certainly, that does not include the indirect costs associated with the supporting of public education. I think, and I can provide that to you at a later date, but I think if you were to assemble all of those costs, you're probably looking at a percentage of 62 to 63% of costs associated with education. Employee benefits at 10.94 million represents about 16.32% of total expenditures. Public safety, which is fire and police, 7.6 million, it represents about 11.42%. Debt and interest, 6.3 million at 9.43%. Public works at almost 5.2 million, 7.77%, followed by general government at 3.4 million, 5.13%. Assessments, other offsets, overlay, as well as any articles presented under this recommendation, 3.4 million of 5.17%. Solid waste, a little over $1 million at 1.56%. And the final two, public services at 1.1 million, 1.65%. And inspectional and economic services is 613,000, just under 1%. Total appropriations of 66,835,500. Actually, that's off slightly. This is the corrected number. Total revenue, 67,245,931.42. Total expense, 66,836,399.13. Leaving an unobligated or a portion of the levy not utilized, 409,532. With a footnote that the 409,000 would be available if there is a consideration to use full utilization of Prop 2.5. So with that, Chairman, members of the Finance Committee, that concludes my presentation. That's a quick summary of what is before you tonight. Certainly, we will dive into the details as we get into the departments, actually commencing tonight. So I'd be happy to answer any questions at this point in time, if any members should have any.
Great. Thanks, Ed. I'd like to highlight one note on that, Ed. It was several years ago, I know it was at least you and I, maybe it was Bill also got together, talking about the adding to the CIP, the 1/10 of 2.5%, for that number now to be basically at $1 million. I mean, that's covering nearly, depending on the year, half of our CIP budget, so that's nice. It's been somewhat painless, and was it 2011, 2012 that we implemented that?
So we implemented that. I think the financial policies were adopted in fiscal 12. This would be roughly year 5 or 6, so that infusion of $100,000 annually is built up to, I think it was 11, just shy of $1 million. Back in the day, our borrowing was in the vicinity of $1.5 to $2 million annually. So we were incurring annual debt and interest costs for an annual borrowing of that magnitude. That is now down to roughly $500,000 a year that we're actually funding our capital through bond proceeds. So we're very, very proud of the fact that we're whittling that down. At the rate we're going at, hopefully we'll be able to fund all of our entire capital needs without bond authorizations in about 5 years. Certainly there are some additional costs that are now built into the CIP plan that were unanticipated, that are public safety related as a result of some federal mandates relative to dispatch equipment, relative to dedicated frequencies on the municipal level. And certainly we will talk about that when we get into public safety next week. But we're trying to at least address that over a longer period of time to minimize our impact on our borrowing capacity. So And hopefully, we can throw some free cash, now that we have the amended free cash policy, at some of these larger ticketed items like we do with stabilization for major fire apparatus that comes with a big price tag. So we're doing what we can to minimize our borrowing costs through a series of strategies.
Yeah, and actually, the second reason why I wanted to bring that out, outside of patting ourselves on the back for this kind of really being an idea that started within us here, is we'll be looking at the interest expense. All you gotta do is take a look at that and say, you know what, if we can knock that down in 5 or 6 years to near nothing, or maybe a one-off kind of thing, the amount of savings there is actually astounding, especially where we still have some fairly new school buildings, and they'll be getting paid off right around that same time, or at least the high school will be. So I guess if we can all hang around for 4, 5, 6 years, we're going to really see some fruits of some things we planned back 6, 7 years ago. I'm not counting on me on that, but you know, we'll see. All right, let's get into the budgets. Let's get rolling on this.
Can I ask
Go ahead,
one
Trevor.
question on that?
Yep.
There were some numbers, I just wanted to make sure I'm following. So we're propositioning a 1.5, you said 1.55% on the 2.5, and that's to cover budget. And if we were to go full on the prop, we'd only have an excess of about 400,000. I guess
So-
for me, I want to kind of understand more
Okay, so
what the full, the impact would be on if we were to go all the way or if we were to stay where we are and what that does.
All right, so 2.5%, let me just turn to a page here, I can give you an exact number.
Yeah.
So, under Proposition 2.5, we're allowed to increase taxation based upon our current levy limit, $1,077,000, all right? Because we have $409,000 available, of that $1,077,000, we're actually utilizing $600-some-odd thousand as part of that 2.5 to fund our operational side of the budget. So if we wanted to go the full 2.5, then you could commit through appropriation that additional $409,000.
Okay.
Now, that gets us at 2.5 of current year. There's excess levy also that we would be allowed to tax if we wanted to at any given time. We're choosing not to. And right now, we're choosing not to go the full 2.5 limit as well for the current fiscal year.
Okay. Yeah.
So the excess levy is really a buildup of prior year not going to 2.5. And as a result of that, I think we put up a slide every year that shows the total savings over the last roughly 8 years because we're not taxing at 2.5. Collectively, we save the taxpayers of this community approximately $23 million.
Right.
So that 23 would really go to roughly 27, 28, because we're not using any of our levy capacity.
No, I guess I just want to be a little forward-thinking on it in the sense that, we've talked a lot about how, there was a comment at the beginning here about how we kind of focused last year during the budget process about, what the different departments need moving forward, and in continuing to do that, I think we've done a pretty good job year in and year out on making sure we're not going to the full level and being as conservative as we can, but I think, at some point, there probably would need to be, down the road, need to be a larger push into that. And I just want to know kind of what the impact in that is.
Yeah, there's a number of moving pieces here, quite honestly. I mean, there's been some discussion, there's been some talk about not going to 2.5, and by not going to 2.5, it gives our Board of Selectmen some financial tools to maybe address the difference in tax rates on the residential and the commercial and industrial, and it may allow them to compress that even further if they choose to do so. And it all depends on a number of things at the time that a presentation is made to the board. considers a number of factors. So it's really a long-term strategy in addressing a problem that started back in the early 1980s, that we're trying to wrap our hands around and trying to control.
Okay.
So a little bit of our short-term / long-term goal here is, we've got 400,000 out there that we don't think we need right now, and still do just enough for the departments to make sure everyone's functioning properly. Our goal for the next 8-10 weeks is to protect that 400 grand, or maybe even make it grow if we find something here. We usually don't, but sometimes we do. And then we just rely on some conservative revenue estimates to basically create some additional, let's just say funding, free funding, come by fall town meeting.
Right. And by no means am I looking and saying, oh, we've got 400, let's,
Oh.
let's try and find something to do with it. More, I'm just trying to kind of,
Yeah, but you bring up a good point that I brought up to Ed for the last 2 years for some reason, and it's a good pennies from heaven kind of thing. Our cherry sheet funding over the last 2 years has gone up over $2 million. I mean, and as a percentage of our budget, it's gone from 17 to nearly 20%. And I tell Ed year in, year out, I say, I don't think that's sustainable. Now, we've got a pretty good economy. They've got things somewhat straightened out down on Beacon Hill. But all it takes is just a little bit of a recession and some stupid things there that all of a sudden our cherry sheets go down $1 million. Well, where are we going to pick that up and still take care of the services we need for the town? Well, there's your tax levy a little bit there. So as we hold back on things, the concern is it still comes down to tax levy to make sure we have minimum funding for the public services and the schools. I'm just very concerned that all of a sudden we've gotten some big increases from Beacon Hill that I don't know where that's coming from.
Chairman, just a
Kev?
question.
Yeah.
So only concerning thing I saw out of the presentation was the growth from this year compared to last year, and you said primarily that was only residential. So what's changed, and where do you see us?
Yeah, I think the economy is very active and robust on the commercial industrial side. I think certainly we've seen some growth in those sectors, more so. I think it all depends on the cycle. It's just a matter of how things fall into place. I think the Auburn Mall activity, that growth hasn't been recognized yet. That will be coming onto the books. Certainly, that will be a good push for the town. But it all depends. It all depends on the timing. Certainly, we're seeing a lot of activity out there, but this cycle seems to be more residential growth than commercial industrial growth. We have recognized as a result of what the board has done over the past 5 years in lowering the commercial and industrial tax rate from a factor of 1.62 down to a factor of 1.20, has really paid dividends, and really we've recognized a lot of growth in the commercial industrial sectors. There's a lot on the drawing board. We do expect that growth to continue, but right now, the assessor is telling me the bulk of the growth is on the residential side in terms of the permits that we receive. So that doesn't mean that the commercial industrial is going to die down at all. It's just the way the permits are falling.
Okay, thank you.
All set, Kev? All right. Any other questions, comments? All good stuff. All right, let's just go through this order that we've got here in front of us that Sharon provided, starting with the moderator. It says flat budget, requested $296, been the same for several years.
Motion to recommend?
second,
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Okay. So the selectmen's budget, amount requested is $11,267, a $300 increase, and that $300 is strictly for a new account volunteer recognition that the Board of Selectmen added this year. Do you have a motion on this?
Motion to recommend?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Our next budget is the town manager's budget. The recommendation is, I'm going to go, the overall recommendation is $372,729. This represents a 3.7% increase over prior year. And I think a couple different pieces on this. Ed, can you tell us what that ICMA annual conference is? That's been added as a new.
That's the Professional Association for Town Managers and city managers throughout the country, and our town manager, I believe, has been asked to present at the upcoming annual meeting
Okay,
on behalf of her association.
good. Okay, that's fine. Do we have any other questions on this?
Motion to recommend?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Manager. Next is Finance Committee. That pizza line item still has not been added, Ed. I don't need it, but it's, we're running out of time on this one, Ed. Our budget request is $815. Motion on
You
this?
can always add it, Mr. Chairman, through a motion.
Motion to recommend, 815.
Get no seconds on that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So voted. Thank you. Going to keep trying. Our next budget is Human Resources.
Reserve. Did you miss that one?
It's not on the list. I think we usually hold off on reserve.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was caught on that, too. Human Resources, the town manager recommended a budget of $72,351, an increase of 1.74% over prior year.
Motion to recommend?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Okay. The next is the Finance Department. Backwards here. Okay. So Finance Department's made up of 3 divisions, and what I've normally done is just go through the division subtotal and any questions on that, but I also usually ask the department head to give a brief overview of anything new that has come up, will come up on this. So Ed, any comments? This is all under your umbrella.
So, well, I can tell you the Department of Finance, as it relates to the Assessor's Department, outside of the operating budget, there are some cyclical costs that will be requested in the warrant relative to the revaluation of property. The Commonwealth of Mass Department of Revenue changed their guidelines in terms of value of property on a 5-year basis, but we have to go through one more cycle. Some communities were granted 5 years. Unfortunately, we drew the short straw, and we're still, the final one is coming up on our 3rd year. Every certification after that will be every 5 years. So as a result of that, we need some software updates, and there is some value of the personal property that's done by an independent firm called RRC. Those costs have historically come to you outside of the operating budget, and it will be presented in a outside warrant article. Other than that, the operational costs are status quo. There are no significant changes to the operating budget. The only changes you're really going to see are in the line items of salary and wages.
Great. So the RRC incremental costs are not in the operating
They
budget?
never have been.
And if I'm reading correctly, that's just over 11,000, is that?
No, those costs are probably going to be in the vicinity of $50,000.
Okay, I like my number better. But we'll go with that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the division subtotals, and I'll open up to question on a per-division basis. First one is the accountant division, amount requested, $205,210. The prior year appropriation was approximately $197,500, so what's that turn into? A $7,500 increase. Any questions on that?
Motion, I don't know, motion to recommend?
Yeah, we don't need to.
At the
We'll do it
end,
on
okay,
the total
all right.
on that.
All right.
I've got one comment on this, Ed. I wanted to bring it up, and I thought it'd be more pertinent to do it under, I'll call it under your budget. I know you have a buyback provision as part of your contract, and I'm not questioning that per se, and I know that can be somewhat tricky to say, should this be budgeted or not? Obviously, it's there every year, and the buyback is certainly part of you putting in longer efforts than your deserved time off and that kind of thing on it. Is there any consideration in terms of putting in an estimated buyback in here, or not? Why?
Certainly, I think we can consider that. It would apply to those contracts that are negotiated under 108N. I know you approved one tonight
Be the
for
manager,
the
too.
library, and these do require approval of the town manager, so it makes a presumption that it's going to be paid without the approval of the town manager. I think it's a discussion I'd have to have with the town manager to see if she would be comfortable putting a value out there prior to her authorizing that buyback
Yep.
provision.
I understand, and I know that's a sensitive topic, but I think from our perspective, it's a real cost that we're likely going to be facing every year, and we could say that about anyone's salary will likely.
Here's what I would suggest.
Sure.
We may consider is putting a value under the reserve component.
Sure.
So it's not part of the budget, it's not a given, it would have to come back to you, it would have to be voted, so.
All right.
That's some,
Well, the other is, my next question was actually going to be to that. Is it otherwise acknowledged under the reserve already as part of how you build that number, or not?
yes.
Okay, so it is,
But I mean, if
It
you
doesn't
would
need
like
to be separately
if you would like
identified,
that
as long as-
identified separately, we could carve that out.
no, I wanted to make sure that it's part of the budget, so that answered my question. Okay, so that's the accountant division. Under the assessor division, town manager recommends $186,445. The prior year appropriation was just almost $178,000, so about a $9,000, $10,000 increase in that. Any questions on the assessor division? Okay.
I'm sorry, just the one item that jumps out of the appellate cases. That's the only one that, we had nothing for 16, 17, now we're at 2,100 for,
We never, that's a line item, quite honestly, that is not known. I mean, the appellate cases are a filing as a result of a denial on a abatement application. Anyone can file it with the appellate tax board. In some cases, we have to hire outside legal services to defend the town. In most cases, it's defended on our own, but there are costs associated with appraisals and things of that nature. So at any given year, I mean, we've been lucky so far that we haven't had to defend many cases, but I can tell you we do. And in most cases, it's done in-house and doesn't require outside appraisal. So even though the history doesn't support the appropriation, one appraisal could chew that money up very quickly.
That's a good question, Kev. A little bit of slush in there just in case. The final division is the treasurer collector, and that division, the amount requested by town manager, $237,000, $878. And the prior year was almost $237,000, so this thing is up 1,000. approximately $1,000. Any questions on that? Okay, yeah.
I'm sorry, just a similar one for tax title, request for 5,000. Last year, we didn't request any. It's about double the three-year average. What is that line?
So these are taxes that have not been paid, so we have to put them into tax title. I can tell you that it costs about $750 for each property that we put into tax title. There are properties well in arrears that would support that level of funding, but it's a very time-consuming process, and quite honestly, there's a backlog at Land Court that really, I think, is preventing us from catching up on those back taxes. So I can tell you, I carry money over every year because even though it's not spent, that money is expended, and it's not going to show here, but that money is expended because the liability exists not only for the current fiscal year, for prior fiscal years, and it allows me to carry it forward. So that's really a misrepresentation of what is spent on tax title, because the carryover money is not reflected in that history.
And that money is basically part of the process by which you ultimately can either get the taxes or start the process for the properties being turned over.
Right, we have to advertise a property and petition Land Court to foreclose on those properties. Some of these cases, sometimes foreclosure will take up to 3 years once you start the tax title proceedings, so.
We did have, what, 3 properties last year?
We had, we sold one locally here. Yeah, I think we sold 3 properties altogether last year, which yielded about, net after costs, about $97,000 of revenue.
And how long did that process take?
Long time.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So the total department recommendation is $629,533, a 2.81% increase over the fiscal 18 appropriation.
Motion to recommend.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted. Thank you. Okay, maturing debt and interest are our last two tonight. And I find the maturing debt pretty interesting, kind of gives an idea of when we're going to be out from under some big bills in the future. The maturing debt, town manager recommends a budget of $4,980,966. This is up 4.1% over prior year. I'll open this up to any questions on it. And I do note, if I'm reading this correctly, that this is the final year for the MS band pay down and for the CIP bond fiscal 08-09. Was I reading the supporting table correctly on that?
So I think there is a schedule there for the long-term debt that through fiscal 3036.
Yep.
Yes, so the 2008-2019, we're retiring the final 125,000.
Right. And the middle school band pay down?
That could still continue. We need to have discussions. This is the residual balance for the Auburn Middle School. That project has not been audited to date. They recently had some HVAC work, and there was to the tune of $300-some-odd-thousand. So we cannot go to market to bond the final town share until we know what our final costs are. So we may have to have a pay down in 2020, one more year. It all depends how quickly the state can do the final audit.
What is the final audit? What is that? So what does that entail for what we
So
spent?
MSBA will come in, and they will comb through and they will reconcile all of the expenditure and revenue records of that project to determine whether or not the town was reimbursed every penny of its state share that the state is obligated to. There is a holdback until the audit is done of 5%. as well as a reconciliation of all the expenditures where they have to break down local share and state share and any outside revenue sources that may have contributed to the construction of that project. I don't know how long that would take. Certainly, the sooner that happens, the better off we will be. We can close out the project, bond our final share, and get out of this pay down, because we now have a State House note, which is the equivalent of a band covering the final share that's not bonded yet. So we couldn't do anything until they finished the HVAC work. I know they had some issues with the subcontractor who installed the initial controls at the middle school. I think they finally have that resolved. But it's discussions that we have to have in the next 30 days to determine whether or not we'll be in a position to finally close out this project.
So that work is still warranted, is that the right term for what they did to replace? I saw with the crane out there.
I think there was a dispute that was filed with the GC that impacted the subs. That took some time to resolve. I don't know if it's 100% complete and rectified at this point in time. I know it was ongoing, but I know the HVAC work, I think for the auditorium and the gymnasium is now complete.
Okay. Thank you.
Ann?
Yeah, question, how long has the school been open? Is this its third year?
I believe this is the third year.
Third year.
You got 3, yes.
Did it take that long to get the high school project bonded, audited, and finished
No.
and bonded?
That happened pretty
quicker, right?
quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
Is it costing us more money, do you think? Because would we be saving interest if we just had long-term bonded it instead of doing the short-term borrowing?
And these are concerns we have with school administration, that we need to close this out as soon as possible, because, yeah, there are some carrying costs as a result of this ban that we wouldn't have if we bonded the final share.
Yeah, so Ed, the third to the last bond, the 16 million, is that a middle school bond?
That would be a middle school bond, correct?
And the one after that,
Well, I shouldn't say that. Remember, these
picked up
bond
on
issues
those?
are made up, they're multi-purpose bond
Yeah,
issues.
That's right.
So I think
Part of those two.
roughly 13 million of that is middle school related, and there may be some SOAR debt in there and some other general obligation.
Okay. And my last question to you is, it looks like the high school debt, if I read correctly, will be coming off
2024?
2024, and that's been just over $1 million a year, and that's not counting interest. I just want to make sure I'm reading that correctly. I am, okay.
Yeah, 2024, we have a debt payment of 1.190 million that will be retired as of that year. So that's a significant savings to the taxpayers of the community.
Absolutely.
When you don't have to raise that in addition to the interest cost, which is minimal at that point of roughly $47,000, but
So, to me, it's just a nice highlight. Hey, look, a few more years down the road, we got a couple of big honking principal payments that are going to come off the books, and that's just nice to see. We're getting caught up with all the newer buildings that we've got. So, enough on pushing on that. So, basically, we have just under 5 million that the town manager is recommending for the maturing debt for the next fiscal year. Any final questions or comments?
Motion approved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, so voted, thank you. Our last budget tonight is the interest budget, which, as we can all see, has been running well over $1 million a year. Once again, this goes back to my earlier point that this is all on CIP stuff, so hopefully we'll be addressing a lot more of this over the next 5-6 years. The town manager recommends the interest budget, if you will, total $1,321,524. This is actually a reduction of $124,000 or 8.58% over prior year. Any questions or comments on this?
Motion to recommend?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So voted. Great. All right. That concludes the budgets that we were trying to go through tonight.
Yeah, just one comment relative to debt and interest. This makes an assumption that our borrowing needs identified under what will be, I believe, Article 4, the capital budget, will be to ban those project costs in year one. So if we ban it, we will not have a debt payment, we will not have an interest payment in FY19.
Okay.
Now, we could change the strategy on that, but right now, I mean, our borrowing cost for the capital is, I believe, $500-some-odd-thousand. The school piece is going to pay a major part of what we do. If we go State House notes, we will ban it for another year with all other capital project costs. If we know at that time we can bond it, that we may go out for a bond issue, and we may have just an interest payment in,
December?
just an interest payment in the spring
Spring.
with a debt payment the following fiscal year.
Okay.
So we may have to make an adjustment at some point in time when that becomes known, but right now, the plan is to short-term borrow.
And we wouldn't have any idea what that interest would be, right? Not even a guess.
We're talking minimal cost, and we wouldn't have to pay it till 2020, which is on the one-year anniversary date of the bond issue.
Okay.
I mean, of the ban.
All right. That's it for the budgets. I know next week, Sharon, we've got the public safety budgets coming in.
Yep.
Great. Any other budgets? Emergency management, right?
Right,
Okay. That's fine. Do you think,
including the capital.
including capital, right? Just a reminder, thank you. In fact, I don't put the...
Did you send us a schedule?
No, I had asked about availability in the departments, what, if they had any dates. I'm trying to get that firmed up, depending on what the committees.
So if anyone's got some issues on dates, that kind of thing, I think I'll let Sharon know.
Yeah, I'm going to be unavailable the 14th and 21st
14th and
of March.
Now, I believe that's, just to let you know, I think schools are scheduled to come in
14th.
the 14th.
DPW, I have tentatively.
So as best we can, we try to accommodate at least your needs and concerns if you want to be present for a particular department.
Right. Do you think with public safety next week, that's a full night's?
That's a full night.
Okay. Chief Coleman, of course. I should know better.
What's
He's not
scheduled
here.
for the 7th?
Right now, I have town clerk elections development, which
Is
is,
it possible to do DPW this 7th?
Bill, would you be,
yeah, it's
We know you-
multiple divisions, but, you know.
Instead, so that I can...
yeah, absolutely.
I'd rather be here for DPW, not that I don't care about the town clerk, but those are little budgets.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. And the
If
CIP
it's a
components and
cost.
stuff, so,
So
yeah,
add the
absolutely.
DPW to what I have, is what
Yeah.
you're saying. Okay.
Great, okay.
And there was 1 week, I think, that you will not be available, correct, Mr.
Right,
Chairman?
be first weekend in April. I won't be available. I think the way we've got this kind of mapped out anyways,
We're going to be
I
done by
don't see
then.
us needing every week on that unless there's a change in something, if the insurance number comes in or something like that.
So I'd
Good.
at least like to notify the school superintendent of her, at least commit to that date if that's agreeable to you.
Sure.
That seemed to work best for them.
Okay.
No, that's-
Public safety next week.
Yep. Can you on the agenda for next week put in the tentatives for the rest?
Yeah,
I know
will
you
do
usually do that around
I will
now,
do
so
that. I
that's
just
fine.
wanted to get a little better
Yeah.
idea.
If anyone else has any bad dates on the next several Wednesdays, could you let Sharon know and that kind of thing, just so we can kind of work things out. It'd be great to have as many people for each of the budgets. We do need a minimum for a quorum. But if anyone has a particular interest in particular budgets, E and CIP especially, I want to make sure we have enough people here. Okay, that's good. Sharon had sent out some minutes for April 5th of last year and May 31st. Any questions on those? All right, that's fine. So meeting next Wednesday at 7.
Mr.
to
Chairman, the
public
revisions
safety.
that I,
Okay, yeah, it'd be great to have
if we
those.
could pass those out to the members.
Anything else? Comments? Concerns? That's great. If there aren't any, then I'll...
Did
Yeah, go ahead.
you get a copy of your presentation?
I had emailed that
Yeah.
with
Can you
the,
bring me a printer
I will
next week?
bring-
I don't have a
Yeah,
printer
I think,
anymore. Sadly,
you know
no
what?
printer.
And I think the 3-hole punch copies, kind of dinosaurs on that, but I like to keep that hard copy too, if you don't
Yeah.
mind.
okay, that's fine.
All right, that's good.
It's hard to read on the phone.
That's a good point. All right, if there isn't anything else, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do you have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So voted. Thank you. Have a good night.